I think people bring things about and they work towards goals that they aren't always aware of.
Are we past the point and we're hurtling towards singularity whether we want to or not because the machines are going to basically create it?
So that sounds pretty intense.
It is and it isn't.
To sum up a lot of it, people love the lie.
So do you think, gosh, my brain sort of explodes at all these ideas.
We all want this without realizing it.
I dare throw this out there. Recently, you were talking about shapeshifters.
Really quick, someone said about our conversation. So these are the best non-stone people having stoner conversation.
Thank you. That's
yeah, no, I like that.
Conrad Flynn, welcome back. Not only the only second-time guest, you're now the only third-time guest.
I built up quite the lead.
As we say in wrestling, Conrad is good for business. So happy to talk to you again. Okay. Anything you want to dive into before I go into my litany? No,
I loved, at the time of this recording, the Courtney Love podcast just dropped, and that was a phenomenal interview.
Oh, thank you.
That was very, very good.
Well, my contention is Gen X is about to have our moment finally. And I think what's interesting is because the media ignored us for so long and our generational story when they should have covered it, which would have been about 10 or so years ago,
sure,
that all those stories are completely fresh. So as you saw with the Courtney episode, us just talking candidly about things that we actually experienced caused this weird ripple because these stories have gone untold for 30 plus years with almost no critical investigation because the protected class has enjoyed the protection for 30 years of no one actually poking those narratives.
No, it was a phenomenal interview, and I saw it, and I was like, look, Billy, you own a professional wrestling organization. What would it take for you to get you and Courtney Love in a tag team match against Kim Gordon and Stephen Malcolmus with Thurston Moore as the special guest referee?
That's good booking. Because Thurston was always nice to me, so you wouldn't really be sure which.
That's the special guest referee. You know, Thurston won't do the count for Kim.
That's good booking, and of course we have Lee Ranallo doing the run-in. He hits me with a.
Who's he going to hit with the chair?
He hits me with an out-of-tune Jaguar.
See, this is where your wrestling promo skills. Yeah.
See. Yeah. Let's just skip past all that. Anything else you want to get into?
You've been
on particular things lately. So
since we last talked, we talked about earlier. You and I talked about the potential CIA influence in rock, which people had a big response to.
Well, let's slow that down.
Yeah.
Do you want to quantify what you saw as the big response?
The response was what you had speculated, which people didn't necessarily appreciate, that you had said there were multiple influences in any genre in terms of what happens. But people were like, well, how top down can the influence be on in entertainment and culture,
Okay, let me jump into that real quick.
Go ahead.
If, let's just say, some governmental entity has access to all the information.
Right. Or super government.
DARPA, like a DARPA type thing.
Sure.
Okay. With AI.
Right.
Okay. So they would know far in advance what has organic energy, what's actually bubbling under.
Right.
So it doesn't take much to take something that already has organic energy. And as I pointed out, which of course got lost in the sauce on some of my comments, was rap was due for an organic moment.
Right.
It's not like they propped up nobodies. They propped up great stars who are still stars and still talked about.
Right.
But as has been contended with the 60s artists and psychedelia and Haight-Ashbury, the CIA did have some involvement there and did step in and kind of sort of shepherd it along. So is it unreasonable to suggest that in a different era, in the 1990s, somebody said, okay, this thing's about to happen. We want to control it, or we want to take advantage of what's going to happen with this so that we get what we want out of it. I don't think that seems improbable.
It's not only improbable, it's what happened. It especially happened. The most amazing thing to come out of that was since you and I talked, more of the Epstein files came out. And a guy who said he was very close with Jeffrey Epstein, the financier, was the former British member of Parliament, Peter Mandelson, whose allegations of his, giving secrets to Jeffrey Epstein was in the middle of maybe bringing down the Labour government in the UK. And Mandelson was the guy who put together the Oasis Tony Blair meeting of '97, the Cool Britannia.
Can you go down that rabbit hole? Because you and I talked privately about this, but I didn't know a lot of this information.
So what was interesting is there was a Guardian article a few years ago with Kevin Shields.
Of My Bloody Valentine.
and Kevin Shields had said that Britpop had some sort of weird backdoor push from the government. And this is Kevin Shields speaking. This isn't you or me going down. I think this is Kevin Shields. And he said, if you were to go through the MI5 records, you would see that Britpop was pushed by the government, or that some strange stuff was going on there. Now, the record label, the classic record label that Kevin Shields was on, is Creation Records. Alan McGee, one of the best independent record labels of all time.
You could argue maybe the best independent record label of all time.
Yes, and you put out Loveless with that, all that stuff, But in '97, Peter Mandelson, the guy that's currently with the allegations of, he admits to knowing Epstein. Photos of him at parties came out. He was going to be the ambassador to America from the UK, but now I think he's been arrested. He's bringing down the British government. He was the guy in '97 who met with Alan McGee, who put together the Oasis Tony Blair meeting, which was, to your exact point, it was to take an emergent music scene, which was Britpop, take the band of the mid-90s in the UK, Oasis, and marry them to this nascent political movement, which was Tony Blair's Cool Labor on the upswing, and say, hey, no, you like Oasis? Well, check out Tony Blair. That was put together by one of Epstein's, later friends.
Right.
But so to your point, not only does that happen, but Damon Albarn of Blur, there's an interview I showed you where Damon Albarn was like, yeah, I was approached by Tony Blair and I found him terrifying in that same era, to be like, hey, we'd like to do business with you. And Jarvis Cocker of Pulp released the song Socialism in '97, that same year, about these kind of closed-door meetings.
And I myself was approached by the Bush government around 2004,
right,
and had multiple meetings with people in the Bush government.
So in other words, what you said, that people were like, this is so outlandish, governments would never want to meet with rock stars and pop stars and try to have any sort of synergy that was...
How about this? How about just even influence?
Right, influence. That did happen. It happened in '97 all over the UK. And you and I talked about this previously, but Tom Dryburgh, another Labour MP, approached Mick Jagger in '67. So this stuff, there's like tons of history.
Let's pull the lens back out. We sit here in Tinseltown. It's understood that the U.S. government had vast influence over the subject matter in movies in the 1930s and 40s going into the 50s. Propaganda efforts involving war, propaganda efforts involving how labor would perceive being working class. These are all known things. A lot of these files have been released.
Right.
Okay. And there's certainly a feeling amongst, let's call it intelligent people in the world, that the U.S. government continues to have an influence over what comes out of Hollywood, much to the detriment of this business, which you grew up in.
Well, I'll mention my grandfather did he did one of those 1950s social message movies. It was an anti-communism. I think it's literally, now considered like a Red Scare film. But he did it in 58, 59, and he campaigned on behalf of Nixon. It was Jack Warner, one of the Warner brothers, who said, hey, Bob, I want you to campaign for Nixon. You seem pretty conservative. I want you to actually go out on the campaign and do this. But that was a orchestration between a campaign, Nixon, and they had the student. This stuff is not unusual.
So I don't understand why people have a hard time believing that it's possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So let me say it slightly differently. To speculate about it, I think, is human. To find enough anecdotal evidence to think like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Is there something there?
Right.
Now, let's talk about the flip side of it. And if you want to take it a different direction, please do. The flip side of it is, to me, is I've had enough of these moments in my life where I'll say something or suggest something, and there's a convulsive reaction.
Sure.
Which is, who are you? Why are you saying this?
Right.
Can this be true, or this can't possibly be true? And then you wait about 2 weeks and it all kind of goes away. And why does it go away? Because people on some intuitive level know that what I've said is directionally true.
Right.
I'm not an investigative journalist. I just have enough experience to know I think there's something over there.
Right. And you've been in those rooms where you've actually been approached. You're not just some guy reading on the internet.
Yes. And I even had no less than Norman Lear once approach me and pull me aside and say, I understand what you're saying, but you might need more context.
Right.
So how did I take that in that moment? To mean, yes, what you're saying is directionally true, but there's probably more nuance to it.
Right.
So when John Wayne was working against communists in Hollywood, he probably believed, I don't think John Wayne was a government agent. I believed he was I believe he believed he was working to the best interests of the America that he believed.
Right. Right.
And I've often find that people in governmental institutions, even if I disagree with them politically, they believe in what they're after.
Right.
So they would have no problem leaning on people or ushering in something that they believe will not only be politically expedient, but also sort of serve, let's call it the greater thing that they're after.
Well, I'm going to belabor the point, but
That's what we do here.
no, that in 1970, I wrote about this on the Substack. You have Blood, Sweat, and Tears. They did a tour in Eastern Europe that the American government more or less pushed them into because their lead singer,
David Clayton Thomas.
Yeah, they were going to pull his green card. I think they did pull his green card, and then they were like, well, coincidentally, we do need a rock band to do a tour in Eastern Europe. And they had previously been involved in like 1968 politics, the Chicago 7, very left-wing politics, but having done now a tour for the State Department and some would say the CIA, when Blood, Sweat, and Tears came back from their European tour, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, they were dumping manure outside of Madison Square Garden, calling them the CIA band, which really hurt their credibility and really damaged the band's reputation. But there you go. That's an example of what they would later do. You speculated with rap is taking something, rock music in 1968, 1970, and saying rather than be oppositional to this, let's use the energy from this.
Okay, so that's why I find it hard to believe that it's so controversial.
It's literally been done numerous times in the UK and the US.
Here's your trivia question today. What was David Clayton's first project after he left Blood, Sweat, and Tears called?
Oh my goodness, I don't know.
And it has maybe I'm wrong, but my memory serves. It was a project called Jelly Roll.
Project Jelly Roll. I have no idea.
That was called Jelly Roll.
Oh, it's called Jelly Roll.
Yeah, not Project Jelly Roll.
Yeah.
So we'll have to look that up as soon as we get. Okay, so let's start here. I saw in a recent Substack, of course, you have your great Substack, The Flynn Effect.
The Flynn Effect, yes.
Substack.
Yes.
Some of it's free, some of it's paid.
Right.
We're all in the game. You were talking about Chariots of the Gods. Now, I used to go stay with my paternal grandmother, Lillian, and she was an avid reader, and she had Chariots of the Gods. So somewhere about age 6, I'm reading, or whatever, 8, I'm reading Chariots of the Gods. That was my first connection to the idea that there'd been alien races here before, and were they still having an influence over? So let's start there, because I want to take us down a particular path.
Yeah, I mean, you see this now with a lot of the, instead of calling them UFOs, what do they call them now? UAPs.
That's
the rebranding.
So, okay, right there. Is that a red flag that UFOs have now been rebranded?
Yes, I mean, in the way, if you're into UFO stuff, it benefits you because now you don't have as much of a stigma. So
But I'm saying, just the fact that it's been rebranded is a red flag. Because why is it being rebranded? And who rebranded it?
Well, that's a good question. It's some sort of flag. I think it works for UFO people. So I would consider it almost like a yellow flag, because I don't know if it's a green or a red flag, but it's something.
Okay.
There was a book that when I did the Tucker episode and it came out in October, there was a book, I'm forgetting the name of it, from the 19th century, but it was called Earth's Earliest Ages. And it was by this theologian in Victorian England, but it tied in essentially with like ancient aliens, where it's the idea that, there are eras, going back to the beginning of man where they're whether demonic or supernatural things. This is where you get into the Nephilim and stuff like that in the Bible. And I read the book and I was amazed because it's from like 1883, but it reads like something from 1968. It reads like Chariot of the Gods or countless Christian books in the 70s. So what's interesting with this alien stuff and all this stuff is realizing how far back the interest in this goes, whether it's spiritualism or supernatural,
Right.
So yeah, I think you think of it as being a 20th century phenomenon, but
okay. So the reason I threw this out here is a little bit of red meat is recently I had the honor to visit for a private tour at the new George Lucas Museum, which is about to open in Los Angeles in September of 2026. So depending on when you see this. And what George has done is, because I assumed as a fan, I just assumed it was going to be very heavy Star Wars.
Sure.
Star Wars is a part of the museum, but it's not the museum.
Mm-hmm.
Really what it is it's the power of storytelling and the power of myth and our connection to myth.
Right.
So Zecharia Sitchin, who wrote the famous book, I think, called The 12th Planet, which ushers in this idea that the ancient Sumerians, and it's all in plain evidence in the Sumerian scrolls,
Right.
only 25% of which have ever been translated, is there's evidence in the Sumerian scrolls that ancient people 7,000 years ago not only lived with alien races, but sort of it was normal. They were like
Right.
spaceship launches and all sorts of stuff. And Sitchin suggested that our obsession with gold and our obsession with certain types of narrative forms has to do with the fact that we were geoengineered to be the humans we are today from whatever we were before by alien races, and that's how we got here. So on some level, and this is where the Star Wars myth is so powerful, on some level, we know that there's this kind of there's this deeper story. Of course, biblical people might have a problem with it, but there's this deeper story where we know somewhere deep in our DNA that the story we've been told isn't true. And so we're basically resonating with the real story without knowing what the real story is.
Well, with Star Wars, that's a funny thing to bring up because, and I wrote about this on the Substack. It was
we need a bell every time we do a plug, including for me too.
Every time there's a plug.
As I drink my Madame Suzu's tea, we just need like a bell.
It'll be full Pee Wee's Playhouse.
I should have my own bell, actually.
Every time you plug, it's the word of the day. No, but I wrote a thing on Substack about how George Lucas took he used for Star Wars, for the macro story. It's from the same book of the Bible that he used for Indiana Jones, which is the Book of Kings. Okay. So Indiana Jones, you have the Ark of the Covenant.
But did Spielberg do Indiana Jones?
He directed it, but Lucas produced it.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
The idea, Indiana Jones is like, it's named after George Lucas's dog, Indiana. So, Lucas produced Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones, you have the Ark of the Covenant, which features very prominently.
Yes.
I think the Levites, I think, can touch it or can open it. But with Star Wars, he takes from the same book. He takes the story of David and the story of Saul, the story of a farm boy chosen to be the guy. But then
I didn't know this.
Yeah, but the robed one, Samuel, who's kind of like the Obi-Wan figure, he initially picks Saul or Darth Vader to be the anointed savior, and he realizes he's picked the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So he picks the second farm boy, David, or Luke Skywalker.
Okay.
And that's why really quick in both stories, like Saul Vader dies on Endor, there's Hebrew on Darth Vader's breastplate. So to your point about stories, the Bible has repeating stories, both in the Old Testament within itself and in the New Testament, where the Jesus story, Jesus in many ways is an amalgamation of all these Old Testament stories.
Sure.
And Antichrist is similarly an amalgamation of all these like villainous figures.
Yes, I know that's oftentimes what the anti-Jesus people go into, like that basically there were Jesus stories before Jesus showed up. I'm a believer of Jesus, so I'm going to throw that out there.
But there were, but that's the thing is he was prophesied and he figures in the older story.
I'm not. We can talk about that some other thing. But what I'm after is what's beautiful about George's museum, and I got to see it in this early stage. Is he's used the different media, so whether it's physical objects like objects from the Star Wars movies or his vast collection of Norman Rockwell paintings, he uses the different media to basically say there's a commonality here in what we're after and what we're interested in. Sure. And obviously he's a master storyteller in that regard, in that he is able to kind of identify what is the core mythological connection that binds us all together. In many ways, it's probably the most unifying effect that we have, is that we're all kind of after the same thing.
Sure. There are many books written about, there's only like 7 stories. There's only,
Sure. Right. So pick a direction. Because here we are, we're taping just after Easter, the resurrection.
Yes.
Right.
To pick a direction, I was going to go into this, during the resurrection, I was going to go into the, at the time we're taping, the Chapel Roan scandal from a few weeks ago. Are you familiar with that?
Okay, so let's do this. Let's play a game. So over here we have Chapel Roan, who's allegedly been discovered as being, I guess, the grandchild of some rich people or something. Sure. That's the controversy? Well, am I summing it up correctly?
Well, but she had also had allegedly, or a bodyguard that may or may not have been directly working for her. Had bullied or had been mean to an 11-year-old girl in Brazil, which then led to this massive backlash against the singer, because they were like, well, she's always picking on people who want autographs. But I wanted to know what your thoughts were when you see, because last time we talked about pop stars and those that need direction or those that are in a bad place. Yes.
Okay, so let's do this. Yeah. Because I love this. This is the artist in me. So over here we have, let's call it this new Chapel Roan story.
Right.
but we're going to approach these as mythological concepts.
Sure.
And over here we have the resurrection. How do these two things go together? Ready? I'm going to answer my own question first, and then you jump in.
Want to know.
Okay, so let's start here. I really like Chappell Roan. I don't know her personally.
Sure.
I mean, I played a festival with her, very talented, but have never met her, never shaken her hand and said that I'm a fan. So what we see playing out right now is an accusation, for lack of a better way to put it, that she's foisted upon the world something untrue.
Right.
So you have a convulsive reaction from the audience, which is saying, wait, I bought into your story. And there's all sorts of layers of that.
Right.
Whether she really was poor or not. There are interviews where she said she was impoverished, or she
showed her tax returns on the,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But then also there's also some hue and cry from the LGBT community that she sort of wrapped herself in the colors of the LGBTQ community, and whether or not she's truly representing and all this type of stuff. So over here we have the concept of identity, and whether or not this identity, in a related but far different story. I'm friends with Laura Albert, who wrote the famous J.T. Roy books, and it was later outed as not that she wasn't a 16-year-old male prostitute who'd written these books. She was actually, a mother living in San Francisco.
Right.
So the idea is when, and I guess what I'm after, and I can talk more directly about Chappell if you want, but what I see is, on some level, the audience is mad that they believed in somebody that they find out that what they believed in isn't true. But why was it necessary that what they believed in was true?
Right. You're getting into this idea we talked about last time with the avatar. They bought into almost the three-dimensional.
Does the art? Here's the question: does the artist have a responsibility to present a true avatar?
I mean,
when your grandfather was in these movies or TV shows, was he playing himself? No, he was playing a character.
No. I mean, you're, especially with publicists in Hollywood, you're always dealing after some point with a fictional creation, or if, at the very least, a caricature, and that's how people become characters of themselves.
Okay, so here's the question: is it fair that Chappell Roan fans would be mad that she may, because I don't know, she may have presented something that's not her?
Well, in a way, the whole thing is ridiculous, because people end up getting into idolatry, and then the fact that the idol doesn't meet the idol requirements. Like, well, you were.
Well, I experienced that in my own regard.
Right. So I want to. That's why I wanted to ask you.
I would meet people, and they would be disappointed that I wasn't whoever they created in their mind.
Right. That's just it. It's a losing gambit. But in a way, what does the pop star do in many cases is, in their team, is they create the idol, or they want the idol. As you know, in wrestling, you want to get the person over. Right.
But let's put it this way: is it better? And we're obviously using Chappell as an example. Right. Because even her name is an invention. Is it better if everything that she'd said was true, or is it better that she'd found an effective way to communicate?
From the Hollywood standpoint, the latter. But basically, it would have been better if she'd been more straightforward. But that's not.
What would she have gotten if she had been more straightforward? And by the way, if she'd never gained any ground in a very tough and competitive market, and we didn't even know who she was, what would it matter? Does she win some honor prize for authenticity?
She was
because in this very setting, talking with Courtney, we got a certain amount of guff for lampooning a certain alternative icon for being a gatekeeper.
Right.
And what was the gatekeeper on about? By the way, that particular gatekeeper is the daughter of a professor.
Right.
Courtney, I didn't grow up with a professor as a dad. You know what I mean?
Right.
So people. Elitists get to play these games with words and concepts, but the real foot soldiers have to go out and figure it out.
But you're also getting to something which is fundamental to show business, where people can their shtick can be anti-shtick. Their shtick can be I don't have one, and that's also, as you know, that's also indie rock gatekeeping.
Okay,
I'm the anti-rock star, but then they end up having shticks within shticks.
Okay, so tell me if what I'm saying is untrue. Are there people commonly known, famous rock stars, that are total frauds?
Of course,
and you hear the stories.
Yes, I mean, in terms of their behavior, I mean, like, it's show business. Like, it's all. I mean,
Bruce Springsteen starts his Netflix special by saying, "I'm not really Bruce Springsteen."
No, of course not. I mean, that's Keith Richards famously doesn't like Bruce Springsteen. He's like, the whole thing's too convoluted. He also says, if you close your eyes, he goes, he sounds like Neil Diamond, but that's this is the Keith Richards scandal that will now happen. But yeah. But that's really quick about
please.
About Springsteen. So I was on a thing.
We got to get back to the other thing.
No, I was just on a thing about comparing Springsteen with Taylor Swift. We're in a conversation with someone who's like, Taylor Swift is essentially the female Bruce Springsteen, because the thing is primarily relatability. And the fact that they both work in kind of pre-60s Americana sensibilities. Springsteen, I mean, you know, when Springsteen first came out, I'm not meaning to bash Bruce Springsteen, but Todd Rundgren hated Springsteen so much that he signed Meatloaf because he thought Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Light was a whole big like Springsteen goof, because he's like, oh, this is so corny, 50s, driving your car with your girl and it being really overwrought.
I didn't know that.
But the same thing was leveled at Taylor Swift, where it's like, man, this is like Doris Day, this is so corny. But they both have a relatability to their image.
Okay, but again, does it matter if they're really those people?
From the showbiz perspective, and as long as, no, like it's wrestling. It's like, that's Hulk Hogan's not his real name.
Okay, so let's go back to Miss Roan.
Right.
So let's say this accusation or vibe or cloud over her sticks. It becomes part of her story.
Right.
Okay, so now we're back to the resurrection.
Right.
What does she do next? You're
I'm the publicist.
You're notably the grandson of a famous publicist.
And my other grandfather was the son of a publicist too. Great grandmother's on Billboard as a publicist.
Yes.
That's a good question. I mean, what I think she should do in some sense isn't good for her career, which is a really big about, essentially go kiss without makeup and just have an about face. But that as in publicist's mind, that's not the move. But that as a if I knew her, something like that, I'd have to think about it. What would you have her do? Because you know her situation better from the inside in terms of the media hates this person. There's a backlash. Like,
if I was advising her privately,
right,
which I'm now about to say what I would say publicly, I would say it's the famous Chinese finger trick. There's no way out of this box.
Right.
So the only way is to lose.
Turn heel, embrace it.
No, not turn heel. Now I'm speaking metaphorically. So before anybody goes crazy with this, okay. You must accept a public death, a public symbolic death.
Sure.
I'm not talking about literal death. I'm not encouraging her in any way, shape, or form to not be here.
Right.
It's the opposite.
Right.
You must resurrect your own self, and the only way you can have a resurrection is you have to go through a symbolic death. In my case,
right,
because it's the easiest thing for me to explain. I created an avatar called Zero, which was most famously connected to the Melancholy album. The character goes insane. The character evolves to a second character, which is called Glass. And yes, the metaphors are real. Glass is easily broken into a million pieces. And then I brought that character back in a third iteration around 2018 called Shiny.
Right.
And now the Pumpkins are about to go on a major tour, and we are going to witness the Parsifal-like funeral of the character. The character is going to finally die in public.
So that sounds pretty intense.
It is and it isn't.
Right.
Because, again, we're talking about something that's completely in the mind.
Right. But
see, let me go back to Miss Roan, because I think it's a really interesting subject to explore. And, you know, as you and I can admit, we don't talk about what we're going to talk about. We literally just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah, well, that's why I like talking to you.
Yeah, we have a good conversational rapport. Right. So in the case of Miss Roan, it doesn't take a MIT scientist to figure out that she's going to be surrounded by a lot of people in fear.
Right.
And they're going to try to game theory out how to pivot.
Right.
Does she do the confessional Barbara Walters style interview? Heck, maybe she wants to come here and talk to me about it. She would be more than welcome. She's a great artist, very talented. And like a Bowie, understands the power of the avatar.
Right.
Probably she's the most powerful artist who's working with avatars in the media right now outside of Gaga.
Right. The Bowie thing is, I mean, Bowie also the son of a publicist. His dad was a public relations guy, which is probably why he was...
Are you accusing David Bowie of being calculating?
You know, I'm going to... There's like... I don't know if anyone's ever said it, but he's like a chameleon, that guy. Like the way he could change. Like, I'm going to be the first person...
Actually, speaking of David real quick, I recently started following his daughter Lexi,
Uh-huh.
who's the daughter, I believe, of David and Amon. And she came out publicly and talked about some of her struggles as a teenager. I highly recommend people follow her on social media because she came out very openly and very soberly. And I don't mean, not on drugs. I mean, she just, in a very sober manner, laid out the difficulty she had as a teenager when her parents decided to do kind of almost like an intervention and send her to kind of a outward bound type camp. And she went through a lot of issues that I'd never heard of. I knew they had a daughter, but I didn't know about these issues. I guess at this point, I don't know how old she is, she's maybe 30. And she talked very openly in this post on her social media about what she went through as a teen, always sort of living in the shadow of this great artist. And of course, her mother's also famous. But then also, the sense of betrayal that her parents sent her away when she was in this really vulnerable place in her life. She doesn't accuse anybody of anything. She just kind of lays it all out and now she's really publicly using social media trying to find her feet as an artist. It's quite interesting because what is she playing with as the daughter of David Bowie? She's playing with, what mask am I wearing here?
Right.
Even if it's my own.
Well, this is something I wanted to bring up to you.
Lexi Jones is her.
Lexi Jones?
Her name.
Check out Lexi Jones. Tying together a bunch of the themes we're talking about is I was at a party about a month ago, and Courtney Love had come up, and someone goes, Courtney's really bold and brave for always keeping her Instagram comments open because half of her comments are just people accusing her of killing her husband. And I realized at the time, when she said this, I'd never put this together.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, Courtney Love, it was the Erica Kirk before Erica Kirk. And I thought of the analogy, and of course, I cannot think of two white guys who are more different in public persona than Kurt Cobain and Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
I literally...
That's quite a stretch you're making.
Yeah, no, this is, yeah. But they both, in both cases, you had these very formidable blonde widows who are just accused of this, for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
And are hated. And you have, in both cases, ironically enough, Kim Gordon, who I don't know, I like her. I loved her memoirs. I've quoted them on podcasts. But Kim Gordon, who once said in Uncut Magazine, she said, I don't know if Kurt killed himself. Frankly, I think there's something to that. Kim Gordon's kind of the Candace Owens figure in this thing. Someone that knew the guy that died and knew him before the wife, and someone who kind of maliciously or whatever, maybe she thinks there's something to it, keeps this story alive and twists the knife on the widow. But both stories are very similar in terms of how this played out.
Okay. I'm going to skip past that because I don't want to wade into that myself. Okay. But you bring up a very interesting point, which goes back to the idea of the avatar has run aground. So using Miss Roan again as the example here. And then the concept of resurrection. Right. The reason the concept of resurrection is so powerful is, unless you're literally going to come back from the dead, the symbolic concept of resurrection is you can be reborn.
Right.
Now, if you want to skip past it as a religious concept, meaning you must accept Jesus as your savior and be reborn in that particular manner, as a public personality, you can be reborn in your avatar.
Right.
And would be my suggestion to Miss Roan.
Right.
You're skilled enough and you're talented enough to remake the avatar. Now, in my case, what I did is I imbued my loss, my tragedy, and my trauma into the character. So I allowed myself to not sort of become some sort of superhuman Ubermensch a la Nietzsche.
Right.
I became a more and more broken figure.
Sure.
And what that did is, here's the best way I can explain it. I had a therapist in the early 2000s, and we were talking intently after the Pumpkins had broken up in 2000. And he said quite cryptically, and it took me a long time to process what he meant, he said, it's good you did what you did, meaning it's good you broke up the band.
Right.
And I said, how was that good? Because at that point, I was still questioning the decision, and obviously I put the band back together at some point. He said, because the public wanted a body and you gave them one. In essence, the public kind of whips itself up into a kind of a mob-like frenzy that it needs to see something. Right. And in the parable, or in the reality, depending how you want to take it, of Jesus' death, it is the crowd that calls for Barabbas to be spared and Jesus to be sacrificed.
Well, to your exact point there, with all the deaths of idols, and I have a relative who made this great analogy, which syncs up very well with your own, with Jesus. is they always either have to believe that the death was caused by a conspiracy, a betrayal. It can't be a stupid death, or it can't be for nothing.
Okay.
There needs to be a deeper betrayer, a Judas-like figure. Or if there is not a Judas-like figure, in the case of someone like Elvis, they believe that he never died, that he was either resurrected or
Jim Morrison.
or he lives on.
Or Tupac.
Or
right?
Tupac. No, but that's just it. But so to your exact point about the idol archetype, either there is a Judas figure who betrayed him, and it follows that to a T. Even in the case
of the parallel here would be, in this case, Courtney is set up in that particular construct as the Judas-like figure,
as the scapegoat, and but in the case of Charlie Kirk too, his wife, and then the people that say no, Charlie Kirk's still alive. And to your thing, the idea that he never really died.
How about somebody asked me last night, do you think Jeffrey Epstein's still alive?
Right. People can accept on some level that people die, that God can show you the red card and take you off the pitch at any moment.
What would you say to Miss Roan?
I would reconsider. I don't know. I'd have to give it some thought, but with a lot of her act, it's intentionally confrontational and it's intentionally surly. The whole thing about, I don't want to say it, but be the C word, that a lot of people will encourage pop stars to be now.
Yes.
When you encourage women to be the C word and then they act like that, that was always playing with fire. So her whole brand, or her whole persona of like, she's the ultra diva who's going to be really surly or really this, that was always going to potentially run afoul if you're rude to it.
Yeah, I have one comment, and then I want to move on.
No, that's great.
I saw some of the stuff floating out about her past and people's TikToks or whatever.
Right.
Sort of surprised by it.
Right.
And then I watched her being interviewed, as a teen. And then, of course, I'd seen her comments along the way, almost like cast in a certain form of bitterness, how she'd been around for 10 years until somebody figured out that she was valuable.
Right.
So to me, the way I connect all these things is, here you have a very talented young woman, obviously with A-level skills, sort of standing there going, hey, what about me? Doesn't happen. She goes inward, finds some resource that she didn't know she had. Let's call it as simple. She found an avatar by which she can project herself out of the world. I did it sort of posthumously, so I wished I'd figured it out in the beginning. And go back to Kim Gordon. Why was I attacked from Kim Gordon? Because I wasn't punk rock enough.
Right.
Like, what does that mean?
That's a $1 billion question.
Okay. So what did Courtney say in the very chair you're sitting in? See, you were real.
Right.
And you got slung up on the cross because you were real, where everybody else around you was faking it. So I was basically being attacked by an icon of the alternative movement for not faking it good enough.
Right.
So this is why I'm empathetic to Miss Roan, because now she's being attacked for faking it too good.
Right. It is amazing how these situations play themselves. I mean, when that happened, I'm sure you...
Well, it's the public pathos, you see. It's the public that sets these things in motion.
Right.
The artist just figures out how to play the public, and then the public ultimately gets mad.
How much of this, when you see an artist go through something like that, do you want to just tell them this doesn't have anything to do with you? This has to do with...
This is the difficulty. It does have to do with them because it could only work in their hands. You could give, if you were able to kind of create a playbook, you're going to say this, you're going to do this, you're going to dress like this, you're going to do your hair like this, you're going to do this type of music. It only works for chapel.
That is true.
It's a playbook of one.
Right.
The best artists, in this case, pop stars, there's only one.
Right.
This episode of The Magnificent Others is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. August is the perfect time to hit reset before the autumn rush begins. And honestly, I can't think of a better place to start than my closet. That's why I love shopping at Quince. Their clothes are made with premium materials, built to last, and designed to become the ones you reach for day after day. Quince specializes in everyday staples that work harder, like their ultra-soft organic cotton tees and premium Mongolian cashmere sweaters. If you're still hanging on to the same worn-out basics, Quince makes it easy to upgrade. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for high quality, not brand markup. And because of that, I was able to get 3 pieces that I absolutely love. A staple in any closet is the 100% organic cotton denim jacket, and it is so comfortable. Also, a favorite of mine is the organic French terry off-shoulder. And for any gym lover like me, the Performance Tech Cargo mid-rise pants are a must. And it's not just clothing. Quince has become my go-to for everything from hotel-quality bedding and bath essentials to premium cookware and travel must-haves. Upgrade your everyday. Download the Quince app for app-exclusive offers or go to quince.com/magnificent. Get free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada and the UK too. That's QUINCE.com/magnificent.
Right, and to your point, it's like when certain quarterbacks go down and the whole offense stinks. It's like, well, the whole offense was built around that guy's skill set.
Yes. So she's built an entire world around her ability to muster up an avatar.
Right.
So my advice, and back to the point I was trying to make, is you have the power to reinvent the avatar. But in order to reinvent the avatar, you must let the other one die.
I think you're right.
Symbolically, before anybody tries to clickbait that.
You have metaphors here.
Okay. Let's carry on. There's so much. We could literally talk for an hour and a half about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your perception of what now seems to be a big obsession, which is the singularity.
Sure. I mean, it's funny. A few weeks ago, the New Yorker wrote about Nick Land, the guy that I had.
You and Mr. Land seem to have a particular public dance going on.
Well, what's funny is he really liked the Tucker episode, actually, and
he probably likes the publicity.
Well, that too, and he's also
in fact. Sorry to interrupt you,
yeah, no.
But literally, someone came up to me the other day, not having seen our previous episodes, and said, "You need to interview Nick Land." I swear to God.
We can make that happen. If he lives in China, so we can fly him out here.
Who's we?
I mean, the greater powers.
The governmental entity.
Yeah, whoever. It would probably go through a lot of hoops. Yeah, no. So the New Yorker did a whole thing on Nick Land because he's become very, how influential he was has come out.
Okay.
And 6 months ago, it was more like, is he as big as he was? But Elon Musk now retweets him and was talking about him, and Elon Musk follows him and was supposed to be at this dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And so the New Yorker wrote an article about him, and Nick Land was on this podcast recently with these guys on the Dangerous Maybe, this podcast that they do with Nick Land occasionally. They're these two guys, Mikey Downs and Nance, and they talk to him. And Nick Land actually said exactly what I said on Tucker, where the other guest, which is this occultist John Michael Greer, said, the singularity is essentially a tech version of Christianity with it's Jesus Christ as a computer, where all computers eventually merge into one reality.
This enrages me, but keep going.
But Nick Land said he goes, I think I do the same thing too. I take Christian eschatology and Christianity, and I merge the oneness of all things, of the spiritual realm, tech, all people being turned into a network. I've turned Christianity on its head and created a kind of Luciferic, Gnostic counter-reading.
At least he's calling it for what it is.
Right. But this is exactly what I said on Tucker, and people were like, is that really true? But that is, so the singularity, what I had said was slightly different. Well, I didn't say it was Jesus' return. I said it was more like the day of Pentecost. It was the day when the Holy Spirit inhabited all believers, and there was a kind of spiritual network turned on. And that is essentially how the singularity, from my understanding of it, because there's many definitions, works.
If there's a they, do you think this is what they're after?
On some level, the world brain, the internet in a sense is the world brain.
Okay, but if we go into conspiracy theories, this seems to connect to ecological movements, depopulation movements.
Yeah.
That whole nexus of ideas. That they, and even Ayn Rand talked about it in, I can't remember if it's The Fountainhead, but it's the idea that, they're going to return the planet basically to nature.
Right.
There's only going to be about 500,000 people left on this planet, and they're all going to be connected to the Borg.
Right.
And jerking off in their brains to each other.
I mean, that's yeah.
But I'm saying, do you think that's what they are after?
I mean, we are building towards the internet already exists, which is itself a kind of global brain. The idea of implanting computers in people and having us permanently online, permanently hooked up. You can shut some people off, you can shut some people on. On every level, we are moving towards that, whether it's intentional or not, whether,
Right.
but you asked me, do I think that they want that? Yeah, of course.
Do you think it's an elitist class that sort of wants to, basically, it's like, it's like a club. There's a red velvet rope. And those who are jumping after the singularity, the Kurzweils of the world, that they get to be in the club, and the rest are either going to perish or be just kind of a slave class.
Yes, on the one hand, I do think that there are people that do that, but my attitude, this is important to know about a lot of what I say, I think a lot of conspiracies do also boil down to when Jesus is on the cross. He says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." I think people bring things about and they work towards goals that they aren't always aware of.
But we're talking about the conscious end of that spectrum.
I think some of them are, but I think some of them aren't. I think some of them are just trying to get rich and they're building it anyway. That was the thing in the reaction to my Tucker thing. A lot of people who work in this industry, very big people, have been like, "Oh yeah, the blockchain does look like the mark of the beast." That was their own separate, like, I've been working on this for years. It says that in Revelation 13. So you have people that were working towards this without realizing it.
So if there's an elite class, how many are there on the planet? Like true elite class? Is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000?
My guess, I put it at 10,000.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, 10,000.
Do you think they're going to get there? And then I want to go back to talking about the let's call it the digital Jesus.
I think, do I think they'll get there? Yeah. In some ways, I think they will. I think people are, the fact that it's now out there that they're building this and that more people are even aware of it from a biblical framework of like this, it does complicate things, but in some ways you get into the idea that by even talking about it, does talking about stuff make it better? That's a big question. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, here's a side question. Can the AI be controlled? Are we past the point and we're hurtling towards singularity whether we want to or not because the machines are going to basically create it? And I have an addendum to that, but please answer that.
At this point, in terms of probably not. Even if America shut it down, China would have their own version of it.
So it's a foregone conclusion.
But the thing as I mentioned this on Tucker is that like there's a horror movie way of thinking about these things where evil is in charge, Satan is in charge, and that's the fact of horror movies.
We're back to avatars. Does it matter? Does it matter if the faith is real? If the singularity is real? We're in a system where people are beginning to believe it.
Right, but my attitude is that God allows all things to happen according to His purposes. So even in the midst of real evil, even evil that Westerners don't understand, the real faith of knowing that God not only has allowed this but has directed this is hard.
That's beyond my biblical pay grade. But I do know that as a sort of a foundational concept for certain believers.
It would be funny if we just leaned into it and we're like, no, I think this whole podcast is now about predestination, and this is now a Calvinist podcast.
We'll go wherever we got to go. Back to digital Jesus for a second. In a meeting I had the other day, the reason I said that enrages me is because it is ultimately the foundational concept of the devil, which is, I'm going to do God better than God can do God.
Right.
It presupposes that through cunning, guile, and technological innovation that we're basically going to match and or surpass God's influence.
Right.
Now, if you're a non-believer, which many people are, that seems like, well, I'm basically holding up a myth against a reality.
Right.
For people like us that do believe, well, then we're basically saying, if we're in their simulation, if we're just a dream in God's brain, well, God's brain's going to win over whatever you think you can cook up.
Well,
did I frame it properly?
No, you framed it really well. There's a great book, easily one of the best books I've read in the last few years, called God and Golem by Norbert Wiener, he was the father of cybernetics. And it's from 1966, and it's about simulation theory,
Oh, okay.
golems, and he talks about video games. And it's like 1966. I didn't even know they had video games, but they did. But he makes the point that when God created evil, or if he created Satan, whatever he created, God ultimately is the programmer who, in creating malignant forces within the game, within our world, he still created it.
Right.
We don't understand it, but he is ultimately charged. When man creates
Yes.
AI, when man creates evil, we are not God. So by creating these things, in other words, when God created evil, it's ultimately a bit of a play where God can, in the book of Job, Satan can petition, but God ultimately says yes or no. When we create autonomous beings, we are not God. We cannot say you can go here but no further. So that is, in a nutshell, why this is very dangerous, because you are creating evil.
Okay, so back to the power of the new mythology. Is the new mythology that we're leaning to something that's ultimately satanic, or ultimately looking for a different form of divinity?
Oh, I mean, I'll tie it into everything with Nick Land and all this stuff. You get into Gnosticism, and specifically the early kind of Gnosticism. I think it's the Ophite Gnosticism, which looked at the serpent as the savior, and Jesus and Lucifer as either being the same or brothers. It is implicitly and explicitly satanic, with Satan representing gnosis, Satan representing knowledge. What Satan did was everyone a favor by giving us open. Yeah, so I think it's all moving towards a
Do you
satanic.
disagree then with the Gnostic concept that because the Gnosticism I identify with is the idea that you can have an interpersonal relationship with God. Do you think that's laced with a danger?
It depends on where the relationship with God is coming from. If it's coming through faith in Jesus and faith in Christ and a repentance that walks with him, that is a kind of knowing, that is a kind of knowledge and light that comes through Christ. But if it comes through man, or if it comes through what is the ultimate non-Christian, but it is almost every other form of religion, which is raised consciousness coming from within ourselves, coming through our own enlightenment without Christ being the sole thing, that is false to me.
So do you see the sort of the Marxist end of this cultural spectrum as sort of working to sort of basically create a detachment from those concepts?
Well, really quick, to go back to Marx's original idea, and I was talking with Nance and Mikey about this and Nick Land. Marx's initial thing was that capitalism eventually, he didn't have a problem with capitalism so far. He said it was beautiful what it had done so far, but he said going forward, it needs to create this kind of communism superstate. All Nick Land and Silicon Valley wants to do is do privatized communism done through tech and done through Skynet, essentially. But it's the same Marxist project of capitalism leading to this singularity, ultimate final state of man.
So in the great battle that lies ahead, whenever that shows up, it's basically going to be this technocratic, satanic superstate versus God's kingdom.
Yes. So it won't be Marx's withering state of communism. It'll be a privatized technocratic Skynet.
Okay.
But those things add up to the same thing.
I dare throw this out there. Recently, you were talking about shapeshifters.
Oh yeah, but if you want
to tee that up.
So Robbie Williams of Take That and the brilliant solo career in the late 90s, covered world parties. She's the one. A friend of mine, we have a long-standing in-joke about that song, but the opening piano. So he had recently gone on a talk show, Robbie Williams, and he had almost verbatim done it could have been a cover story of part of me thinks it was. Part of me is just like, he's like, man, that Corgan interview where he talks about a shapeshifter, people still talk about that. He had said that he had seen a woman become, I think in the bedroom, shapeshift briefly into a reptilian creature.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a post on Substack, The Flynn Effect.
You name dropped me, by the way.
Oh yeah. and because I mentioned you, but there's been a couple other people that have claimed to have seen shapeshifters.
Such as?
Britney Spears has said it. A boyfriend of the folk singer Judy Sill said that while she was reading Rosicrucian transcripts, she briefly shapeshifted into a reptile. And William S. Burroughs and Brian Geisen, people would say they would, become invisible or shapeshift. And a friend of mine...
Didn't you also write about somebody disappearing on stage?
Yes, that was Diamanda Gallas, if that's how you pronounce her name.
I saw Diamanda once live.
That sounds pretty intense. She's maybe the most intense performer. But a friend of mine who's Iranian, he's fundamentally Iranian Gnostic, and he was like, and I asked him, "Were you on drugs?" He goes, "No." He goes, I was very close to the stage, and I saw her disappear on stage. And I said, well, I said, let's go back to that. You saw her disappear on stage. Can we circle back to that? And I said, what did that look like? And he said, she just became more and more pixelated, and you can kind of see through her a little bit. So for what it's worth, that is a strange but real secret history of people claiming to have seen that.
Anything you want to probe into there?
I mean,
I'm less interested in my part of it all, but I'm more interested in how you view it.
There's a couple of different ways to view these things. With all these things, you also have something people call supernatural apathy, which you can get into weird stuff or be thinking about weird stuff. But as you know, after a certain point, you're like, I've got to pick up my kids. I can't be thinking about, like, I want to shut this all off and go be whatever. As you know, part of me is just like, well, this is what people, maybe they have.
Well, can I add one thing to that from a personal level? Having experienced intense supernatural things to me many times, dozens of times, there is a moment where you're now imbued with a new awareness, and of course, it does reorganize the way you see the world. But then at some point, you've got to go get a sandwich from the refrigerator,
right?
And you come into almost like a weird conflict,
right? That's what I'm talking about with the supernatural apathy, where it's like, do you want to just be scared out of your mind or freaked out by this, or do you want to just go play Xbox?
Yes, I was talking to somebody the other day about what we would now call people being woken up.
Right.
What Alex Jones would refer to, kind of like this idea, like you need to wake up. And what does that mean? And I've talked to other people who've experienced the same thing that I experienced, which is I walked around for 2 years in sort of a kind of a sense of fear.
Right.
A sense that there was this whole other reality that I lived alongside with in parallel and was totally unaware of, and then woke up one day and realized, oh my God, this is part of, not only is it part of some hidden world, it's part of everyday life. And in many cases, it's hiding in plain sight.
Right.
And even Alex has talked many times on his podcast through the years about how, the overt Satanists will basically virtue signal into the world, not for those that are asleep, but for those that are awake, almost doing kind of a na-na-na.
Sure.
We're right here and there's nothing you can do about it.
I could see that. But to your thing about the apathy, that's really interesting, because it's like you do want to move on with your life, and the fear. So, the opposite of fear is faith. And so with all this stuff, when people approach these things, but without any sense of faith or with any sort of biblical understanding, I would say it just has the tendency to promote fear and to spook you out. So what begins is someone maybe even getting into astrology, and initially it's helpful and does this or that, but then when they run into bad luck and they have no safety net for this, other than that something is playing with me, it just paralyzes them, because they're only, in the words of Stevie Wonder, when you believe in things you don't understand and you suffer, you just freak yourself out.
Is that a particular song or
Superstition?
Oh,
yeah.
You were paraphrasing,
no.
Stevie. I'm not sure how I can connect shapeshifters and let's call it supernatural apathy to what we're talking about, other than to say that as we sort of go in and out of different perceptional realities. I think you hit it where most people draw the line, which is like, even if I intuitively recognize there's things I don't know and there's things I don't understand.
Right.
And most people these days don't even classify themselves as religious. They like to use the word spiritual.
Right. Really quick, I know someone who says, I'm religious but not spiritual, which I always think is funny.
Does mysticism have a future in rock?
I think mysticism is the thing to buy stock in general with a lot of this stuff. I think that's the way. I just think there's going to be an explosion of that. There already is. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I said somewhat infamously about 10 years ago in Rolling Stone that I thought the future of rock and roll was God, and it was the third rail that had never been truly embraced. And I really believed it at the time, and now I'm not so sure, because of the rise of this digital Satanism kind of vibe.
Well, we'll tie it.
In essence, the numbers are rewarding the sociopaths.
What's gonna happen is they'll converge with AI and oracles, where this is already happening. This ties into everything we've talked about. In the next few years, what is the difference between AI and an oracle? Where it's like, or a divination system. 100 years ago, there was something called the oracle, the astral force.
But can I stop you right there?
Of course. You can always stop me.
Thank you. I get it. I get complaints about interrupting guests.
No,
Do you believe in psychics?
I believe people can have. I think it's mostly fraud, but I think there's stuff that can bleed through where they can't reliably do it usually, but I think stuff like that can happen.
Have you had a positive experience with a psychic?
I've never seen a psychic.
Okay,
but have you had weird, like we're saying, synchronicities, or what would happen?
I've had incredible experiences.
Right, so I think that stuff can happen, but in terms of someone being able to sell it, I think usually at some point, like a TV antenna that's usually wonky, but occasionally it's right there.
Right. Okay.
People can tap into it, but can they turn it into a reliable business? Usually not.
You have to see the psychics I see. I'm not trying to derail what you were saying. I'm saying is, I just want to be transparent that what you see as a sort of a blip in the system, I see as a feature.
Well, I think this. I think with a lot of the AI stuff, when the computer, which we call it AI, but it's a very amorphous term.
Right.
When it already knows everything about you, and instead of asking it a general question like what was on TV last night, which is a question from 1998 that is now TV works anymore. If you were to ask it, should I break up with my boyfriend?
Yes.
Should I, and what if the AI starts taking in astrological things about you? It starts taking in divination things about you. Where does the line between the algorithm is just ones and zeros that's based on past information,
right?
And where does it get into mysticism?
We're right back to the same conversation again, fortuitously.
Yeah.
Yesterday, it was one of those YouTube things where I was watching something else, and I think I fell asleep. So when I woke up, I was in the middle of a documentary about The Amazing Randy. Have you seen this documentary?
No.
The Amazing Randy was a high level magician, but most notoriously, he's passed away now, was a skeptic. And he went around and was on television constantly sort of debunking. I think his most famous act was he went on Johnny Carson, of all things, had done his own private investigation of a charismatic preacher named Peter Popoff.
What a name.
And exposed Peter Popoff's wife was feeding him information, and Peter Popoff seemed to be picking guests at random, saying, there's a Mary England out here.
Right.
And she would stand up and he'd say, you live at this address. And The Amazing Randy had recorded the wife feeding him the information when Johnny Carson exposed all this. I grew up with Peter Popoff on television. Peter Popoff would get these guests in an animated state, put his hand on their forehead and say, heal in the name of the Lord. And amazing miracles seem to happen.
Right.
So as part of the exploration in the documentary, it gets into the concept of, can healing take place if somebody believes what's happening is real? We're right back to the Chapel Roan conversation.
Right.
And we're right back to the appearance of digital Jesus.
Right.
If you get digital Jesus, because digital Jesus seems to be able to spit out a bunch of stuff at you, which seems to be mystically derived. What all it is just data that it's collated through your 40 years of internet abuse.
Right.
Is the residual placebo effect powerful enough that it's worth the effort?
Well, in terms of like belief causing stuff, I mean, in some cases, I think that can drive stuff. The power of positive thinking. You as you get into this weird thing.
Well, our current president is a big follower of Norman Vincent Peale.
I'm going to do a Substack post soon. It's going to be on.
I don't want to ruin your Substack.
No. It's going to be on esoteric Trumpism. It's going to be on like James Wasserman saying Trump was he is Crowley's ideal because of his harnessing of willpower. Constance Cumby's belief that Trump, eventual belief that he's like the Antichrist. Like there's an entire. There have been books. You can write volumes on
cottage industry.
But to your thing, what is a miracle in a sense, but a glitch in the programming? It's glitching the.
See, that's my argument about psychics and astrologers. Is they're a feature of the system? They're not a bug. I'm not trying to argue with them.
No. I know. But I think they happen. But I think there are certain things that we're commanded to not dabble too much. I forget I think it's in the book of Deuteronomy. But the secret things belong to God, and I think beyond a certain point, you're trying to peel into the secret things. Is what I think about that.
Or we're just looking over the fence at Disneyland, seeing how they.
Well, that's just it. Where the line is, it's like political incorrectness in humor. We all know there's a difference between what is a rude joke and what is funny.
Sure.
But we all have disagreements about where that line is. And that's what the whole debate's about. And the same thing here. We all agree there's certain things you shouldn't peer into, but there's just a disagreement about where that is.
So is your hope or aspiration that we become a trusting people and and the world would animate itself more properly if we just trusted. I'm not being silly when I'm saying trust in faith, like have actual faith.
Well, not just faith, but repentance and
the whole
hog thing. I mean, it's back to the police stations. We don't have a ton of police stations near us because people are not. Yeah.
Have you seen? It seems to me to be a recent feature of the system that they're going way out of whoever they are.
They know who they are.
Okay, great. They seem to be going way out of their way to normalize what scares us. I can't remember what the instance was. There was a recent thing that happened where one of my children got really genuinely scared about something that in modern culture has been normalized. And I had to tell my child, your reaction was accurate. Well, I'm the one who has the problem because I've been normalized to accept this fright in the world, where your reaction is actually the accurate organic one. And you should maintain this. I've already been sort of convinced not to be afraid.
Sure.
But we should be afraid.
Well, you're restating one of my favorite writers, G.K. Chesterton. He said, when your old grandma gets weirded out by something, it's like, oh, that's so improper. He goes, your grandmother may actually be more of a living creature, and you're just dead inside. We're talking, and so whether it's grandmothers or your small kid, how often do you see now? You walk by a house on Halloween, and it's like decapitations and stuff. That's like this is actually like a crime scene. This isn't like Charlie Brown Halloween.
Well, even I saw a post yesterday because we just had Easter where somebody was saying, "How do we get from Christ on the cross or rising?" Sorry, Good Friday. How do we get from Christ is risen to Easter bunnies and eggs? And then linking it back to fertility rites and
the Ishtar cult. Easter.
Yes.
Well, that's always funny in We're Strange as a Christian is that people wish you happy Easter, but it's like it's that famously was melded with the Ishtar cult. Easter.
I think where you and I, and again, it's just for the sake of conversation. I think where you and I are on slightly different paths is I'm more of a Gnostic Christian pagan.
Sure.
Because I've worked my whole life in the shadows of things. So those shadows don't scare me. I'm not saying they scare you. I'm saying
no. But
that's the language I work
we're both
in.
acknowledging it, but it is strange because it's like Christians are using it, and it's like, well, so then Christians will call it Happy Resurrection Day, but then also has like a strange hallmarky Happy Resurrect. So it can be very actually strange as a Christian sometimes around Easter, just because it's a strange branding mix that goes on, whether it's the bunnies or the.
I do want to share with you something that happened to me, and it happened to me via psychic.
Sure.
And you can take it for
of course I was
wherever you like. Almost everybody on my mother's side of the family died relatively young, and usually in tragic ways. And so the psychic was pointing out to me that I needed to resist the family urge on my mother's side of the family to be defeated and basically give up and die, like basically go into kind of a like it didn't turn out the way I wanted. I'm out, and then basically let the life force go out of them, and that set the conditions by which they had early demises. And so in investigating that, I wanted to understand, let's call it the root in that side of my family, or where it went wrong. Because I think on my mother's side of the family, there's a gift for divination and other things that are important. But anybody that would know my work understands. So let's call it the shadow work that I've done. It certainly people respond to that in different ways. And what the psychic told me, and it was all part of the same conversation, was, and again, whenever I say these things, and I say these things in private, I'd say this to you in private, no problem, is when people push back on what I tell them I've been told. What I like to say is there's no means by which I can ascertain whether or not what you're telling me is true. It's just another mythological chip to put into the mainframe computer over here and decide whether or not it has any value.
Right.
So it's a story. So I'm willing to share it simply as a story, and you can take from it what you like. And what the woman said was, your family on the mother's side in Europe was really skilled at making dolls, and people would come from all over to buy these dolls. And something about the psychic gifts in your family, it's like your family knew how to make dolls that people would find some sort of healing in.
Right.
Similar to Kachina dolls in Native American lore in the Southwest, that they represent something sort of mythological and or celestial. And that ultimately my family was persecuted for this gift. And so in essence, the family went underground. And so I was the byproduct of multiple generations who were afraid to be openly speaking about the things that you and I speak about so easily. And as an artist, I've lived in that realm and spoken that. And so the woman said, you're the first person in your family in like 100, 200 years that's decided to out yourself and come out for what your family gift is.
And she didn't know this about you, but she was intuiting that, you're saying, when she told this to you.
Yes.
And she was correct about that stuff. So
it feels correct to me, but there's no way I can say this.
But that's what's always dangerous about that stuff is there's a mixture of truth and falsehood or something.
But let me go back to Chapel Roan for a second.
Right.
I don't care whether or not it's true. That's the difference. And I'm not saying that to you in a confrontational way. I'm saying I literally do not care if it's true. See, this is the way, and this is why even when we were talking about gender spectrums, I've oftentimes prayed in recent times, what is happening? Like, let's call it the general, like, why does the world seem to be going haywire? And of course, you get people with the fourth turning, whatever.
Right.
I'm asking on an intuitive level, God, if you can speak to me, can you tell me what is happening? And the response that I've gotten, at least the one that I understand the most, is if you live in a world that is a lie, the only way for the world to advance is for the lie to be exposed.
Sure.
So you're going, you being all of us, you're going through the horrible thing of the lie coming out.
Right.
So we see the exposure of government,
right,
aliens, whatever, and all whether they're controlled or not. There's a sense in the general public that a certain type of truth, which has been held behind the scenes, and maybe it goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, is finally coming to the fore.
Right.
Where my mind next goes is, are we mature enough to actually hear the truth? Like Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. In essence, if the government turned tomorrow and said, all right, here it is. Here's no CIA anything.
Right.
Here it is. We did this happened. Here's the truth. We found this aircraft here.
Right.
Here's the pictures. Here's what we know. Go at it.
Right.
Could the general public actually handle it?
The answer to that, I would say, is no, because to sum up a lot of it, people love the lie. People love.
Okay, so let's go there, and this is a good way to kind of start wrapping it up. Why do they want the lie?
But I mean, you're getting into something that we talked about this entire conversation, whether it be the power of positive thinking or Gnosticism. I think we talked about it off air once. The roots of the word glam or glamour comes from the occult. It comes from the idea of it's casting a visual spell. And so much of what Hollywood is, and so much of what show business is, but also politics and magic thinking, is you start with the image and work back. And this is to the thing about avatars and Chapel Roan. You start with what you want to be, regardless of the truth. There's actually a Lady Gaga quote about this exact process. You tell yourself a lie until it becomes truth. And she's like, that is the process of my whole thing. Is you tell yourself the lie. I am this. I am that. I am being one of the names of God. You build up through your pure willpower what you want reality to be, and you force it.
Okay, so
people love that. People love the false image.
So is the false image of what I trade in and what your grandfather traded in, is that ultimately harmful?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Of course it is. How,
I don't know if we could follow that up. All right, I got one more question for you. Thank you again, always. There's always, we should have our own show. Ready?
Yeah.
Do you want to live forever?
Through the biblical concept of you die and you're with the Lord, you're with God. It's better than the alternative of living forever in torment in hell. But can the human mind comprehend living forever and having no end post to anything? That's a very deep and scary.
Okay, how do you want to live forever on this planet? You're still a young man. If you were afforded life extension technology, say in 40 years, are you taking them?
If it would extend me from like dying at 72, the expected age or whatever for men, to 150, I would microdose Methuselah pills to get to somewhere, maybe not 900, to live longer, but I wouldn't want to live forever. All your friends.
A certain celebrity, whose name I shall not divulge, once told me they were on a boat with some heavy hitters whose names I also won't divulge.
Sure.
And on that boat was somebody who was, heavy in the science end of the world. And so imagine like A-listers on a boat owned by another now deceased A-lister. You can do your math there. And this person told these A-listers, if you can live another 30 years, you'll live to 130. No problem. And that conversation was 15 years ago. So in 15 years from now, if they offer you the chance to live at 130, are you taking it?
It's general health pills. Yeah, I'll live to 130, something like that.
What about 200? What if it's something out of David Lynch's Dune, where you're floating in the weird pus suit?
It depends on how many of my family are still alive. At some point, you might just be
Sure.
like.
But can you envision a world where that's going to happen?
I think things are already on track to spiral up much earlier than that.
Right.
And I'll say this really quick. After my Tucker episode came out, someone who was related to one of the founders of one of the big tech companies, and shouldn't surprise anybody, but it's still interesting. She called me up and she was like, again, you would know her husband, her ex-husband, and she said all these guys have life extension plans that involve like sacred geometry and these heavily occult concepts. But she said they all have them. So regardless of what people say, when they say I'm Mr. Atheist, I'm Mr. Science, when push comes to shove, everyone, if it means living a little bit longer, they'll sit under they'll do pyramid power. They'll do the hypercube. And last thing I'll say, the hypercube that, when Lenin died, they tried to freeze him forever by putting him in his mausoleum, which isn't a pyramid, it's a hypercube. Lenin is buried in these cubes to try to keep him in the fourth dimension. The guy who modernized the hypercube was Charles Hinton, and all the occultists were like, "Oh, he's figured out the hypercube, the Tesseract cube." The great grandson of Charles Hinton, the guy that found the Tesseract cube that Lenin's buried in, is Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI.
We made it through 3.
Exactly.
Who knows what controversies will
all of them
will engender?
All
next.
of them.
All of them. All right, we'll take them all on.